जस पंजाबी देखते हुए सारे दर्शकों को मेरे लो प्यार भरी सत श्री अकाल। तुहाडा स्वागत प्रोग्राम अज दा मुद्दा दे विच मैं तुहाडी होस्ट आशमिता सारिਆਂ ਨੂੰ शाम के प्रोग्राम दे विच एक बारी फिर निगी स्वागत करते हैं। इस महीने असी एक ऑन गोइंग टॉपिक लैके तुहाडे नाल प्रोग्राम पेश कर रहे हैं। एज यू नो वुमेन्स हिस्टरी मंथ चल रहा है एंड खास करके यूनाइटेड स्टेट्स दे विच औरतां दे वख-वख मुद्दिआं नूं असी कवर कर रहे हैं, जिस तरह उन्हां नूं दुनिया दे विच खास करके इस मुल्क दे विच कवर किया जा रहा है एंड फाइनली डिस्कस किया जा रहा है। इस लहर दे विच असी ये वेख्या है कि जिथे हैल्थ केयर की गल आती है, इनफॉर्मेशन की गल आती है, डेटे की गल आती है, औरतां नूं लैके इस चीज़ दे विच एक बहुत वड्डी कमी पाई जा रही है। ये कोई नवी खबर नहीं हैगी, बट इस एरिया दे विच भी जो तुसी औरतां दी हैल्थ की भी गल करदे हो या ओहदे अराउंड जो इनफॉर्मेशन जो स्टैटिस्टिक्स एग्जिस्ट करते हैं ਉਹਦੇ ਬਾਰੇ ਗੱਲ ਕਰਦੇ ਹੋ। ਅੱਜ यूनाइटेड नेशनस ਵੱਲੋਂ न्यूयॉर्क सिटी ਦੇ ਵਿੱਚ ਇੱਕ ਬਹੁਤ ਹੀ ਇਨਫੋਰਮੇਟਿਵ ਪੈਨਲ ਰੱਖਿਆ ਗਿਆ, ਜਿਹਦੇ ਵਿੱਚ ਇੰਡਸਟਰੀ ਲੀਡਰਸ ਇਸ ਏਰੀਆ ਦੇ ਵਿੱਚ ਵੱਖ-ਵੱਖ ਔਰਤਾਂ ਨੇ ਆ ਕੇ ਆਪ ਦੇ ਏਰੀਆਜ਼ ਬਾਰੇ ਇਨਫੋਰਮੇਸ਼ਨ शेयर की, ਉਹ जानकारी शेयर की कि कित्थे तक जिथे औरतां दे रिप्रोडक्टिव हैल्थ या ओवरऑल हैल्थ की गल आती है कित्थे कमियां हैगियां। सो इस पैनल तो अज स्पीकरस साडे नाल स्टूडियो पहुंचे, मैनूं बहुत खुशी हो रही है, उन्हां दे नाल भी तुहाडी गल करावांगे। बट उस तो पहले जिस संस्था ने साडी अपनी संस्था ने इस पैनल नूं ऑर्गेनाइज किया यूनाइटेड नेशनस दे नाल रल के, उन्हां दे बारे थोड़ी जानकारी लैंदे हां। साडे इस प्रोग्राम दे विच पहले गेस्ट जो सानूं ज्वाइन कर रहे हैं, प्लीज जॉइन मी इन वेलकमिंग Monica Gill, Beth Ann Walters from the Sikh Human Rights Group. Welcome to you both. Sat Sri Akal. Monica, it's so good to have you again. When it comes to the work that Sikh Human Rights Group is doing, our viewers are very familiar with the projects you've been working on, especially back during the farmers' protest, jadon Kisan Morcha hoya si, Sikh Human Rights Group ate tuhadi activism full display te sigi. But today we're talking about something a little different. Before we get into that subject, main chahangi tusi viewers nu ek wari fir yaad dilao, what is this group and what kind of work does the Sikh Human Rights Group do with the United Nations?
जस पंजाबी देखते हुए सारे दर्शकों को मेरे तो प्यार भरी सत श्री अकाल। सिख ह्यूमन राइट्स ग्रुप एक ऐसी ऑर्गेनाइजेशन है जिन्हों को स्पैशल कंसलटेटिव स्टैटस है एकोनॉमिक एंड सोशल काउंसिल UNO दे विच, ते इस स्पैशल कंसलटेटिव स्टैटस करके जो UNO दे विच बड़े बड़े कॉन्फ्रेंस होंदे आ, साडी राय पुछी जाती है तो असीं अपनी राय दे सकते हैं। जो फार्मर्स प्रोटेस्ट शुरू होया सी, मैं उदों इस ऑर्गेनाइजेशन दे नाल वॉलंटियर करना शुरू किया तो फिर एम्प्लॉयमेंट शुरू की। जदों मैं फार्मर्स प्रोटेस्ट चल रहा सीगा उदों साडी सारियां दी असीं फोकस शिफ्ट किया एक्सक्लूसिवली टू द फार्मर्स प्रोटेस्ट। बट आम तौर पर जिहड़ा तुसीं अज देखोगे, वी वर्क ऑन अ डिवर्स फील्ड ऑफ थिंग्स। साढ़े को वुमेन्स इशूज़ भी है जो बेथ लीड करती है तो थाड़े नाल गल करूँगी। हुण मैं करदी हाँ फूड सिक्योरिटी एंड सीड्स भी, सीड्स की ओनरशिप की हुंदी आ ते फूड दुनिया च किन्ना कौन ओन करदा, किद्दां बेचिया जांदा आ। साडे कॉलीग्स होर है जिहड़े तुसीं देखोगे जिहड़े क्लाइमेट जस्टिस ते काम करदे, क्लाइमेट चेंज ते काम करदे आ, जिहड़े WTO and subsidies issues ते काम करदे आ। So there's a great range of topics that we work on, and साडा गोल हमेशा ये है भी सिक्खी परस्पैक्टिव की है, पंजाबियां दा इच इंटरस्ट की है भी, उन्हां दा इंटरस्ट भी देखिया जावे, उन्हां दी बेसिकली जो भी हो रहा है it's in their best interest.
Thank you so much, Monica. So this particular session that we're going to show viewers today, they kuch tonu jhalak bhi dikhawenge, kuch nazariye dikhawange. This panel focused on women's menstruation, right? And so when we talk about jadon औरतां दी health दी गल आंदी है, the last thing that you will hear खास करके साडी community दे विच या South Asian community दे विच, it's seldom that you hear people openly talking amongst each other about all of the various issues that exist when it comes to women's reproductive health, especially their menstruation. Beth Ann, you have put this panel together. Before we even get to some of the amazing topics that were discussed, the amazing panelists that joined, you were telling me this really interesting data point from the European Commission when it comes to pollutants, and an opportunity that could have been taken advantage of but wasn't. Beth Ann?
Yeah, I think, and I can't remember, it wasn't too long ago, but European Commission has basically collected, you know, what is some of the top 10 polluters to at least our beaches, etc. And they found that menstrual products are in the top 5. You know, it's a big issue, and they said that they would tackle the top 10, and just kind of completely, you know, ignored that. There was no resolution, there was no kind of action on that. And it's, you know, we'll see with the speakers we had in our panel, it's so many of them would have been an opportunity to invest in these companies, or at least invest in the STEM, you know, the research into these products, so at least that we can start tackling these issues. But I think, you know, what you've mentioned, it's such a taboo topic that we just scare away. We're like, well, it's an issue that 50% of the world deal with, and they deal with that privately, and so we're just going to let that happen. If we can tackle all the other 9, then maybe that doesn't really matter, you know. And again, because it goes back to, you know, a lot of the time we use menstrual hygiene, or we call it sanitary products, etc. It's already reiterating the taboo because it's seen as dirty. Right. So obviously the products that are waste, yes, we do need to dispose of them in the right way. Hopefully, if that's in a sustainable way, fantastic. But it does need to be dealt with because it is blood effectively. You do need to do that. But it's not dirty, you know. It's if you cut your hand right now, I wouldn't scare away. You just give someone, you know.
I mean, not only is it not dirty, but it's an area that holds potential. It holds a tremendous amount of information that can be studied, right? And I don't want to get ahead of myself because ਅਸੀਂ ਇਸ ਚੀਜ਼ ਬਾਰੇ ਹੋਰ ਵੀ ਜਾਣਕਾਰੀ ਤੁਹਾਨੂੰ ਦੇਵਾਂਗੇ. One of our amazing panelists is here who's going to talk about this. Beth, you know, we've attended this panel, so I have all this information in my head. Our viewers are just now hearing about this. Tell us about this panel and the kind of folks that you brought together to speak today.
Yeah, so it was part of the UN Women CSW. So the CSW stands for the Commission on the Status of Women. This was their 67th session. So for context, COP27, COP26, you know, we've all heard of the environmental conferences. They are widely attended by, you know, most countries, whether that's country representatives or NGOs, and people follow it on the news. This is the female equivalent. It's been going on, yeah, it's the 66th session, so 67th session rather. It's been going on a while and people don't know about it. So each year they have a theme. Last year's theme was Women in the Environment, and we held an event virtually, and that event was to talk about the barriers that exist that prevent people who menstruate from being environmentally conscious with their products, you know. So the fact that there isn't products, the fact that it's put on us as responsibility, but the fact that, you know, the politics behind it, the taxation behind it, etc. So what was really nice is that, again, we've connected with one of the panelists who you'll hear from soon, where they have created these products. They are flushable, but they're also, so they're sustainable, but they're also affordable. Right. So our panel this year's theme was Women in Technology and Women in Innovation. So that was where we came up with the title, The Innovation of Menstruation. And so that's where we had an array of kind of panelists where they focused, you know, 3 of them focused on these really creative ways of using menstrual products, so that, you know, one of them, like you mentioned, collects the blood and we use that, but also the other 2 so that we can tackle one issue, which is the lack of access, but without creating more issues, which is just this overwhelming pile of menstrual products that are living longer than, like, you know, they're 500 years.
I was just going to say, I mean, I remember looking at some of the slides that were shared, and some of these products, their, you know, biodegradable timeline is literally in the hundreds of years. मतलब 100, 200, 300 साल लग रहे एक sanitary napkin ਨੂੰ dispose होने ਲਈ, degrade होने ਲਈ. Can you imagine? And this is in a climate where you look at a country like India. A small percentage of women are even using these products on a regular basis. Imagine if all of those women were using them, the kind of pollution we would have. So there's definitely multiple problems built in. I want to hear from the panelists who are joining us today. Beth Ann, before we bring them on the program, a quick word from you about how all of these women came together, how you were able to pull these great speakers together for this panel.
I mean, I think that, unfortunately, although they have done these incredible things, again, the platform isn't there. I think that they will go into this further in terms of the funding, in terms of, you know, even the CSW, there isn't this funding behind it. There's so much. So I think that, you know, I hope that they all kind of really benefited from that. And the people who were there, really benefited from the talks. I think that finding them was just kind of, I've been involved in this sphere anyway, and so it's people I'm interested in hearing about, because I think, well, I menstruate every, you know, effectively month, every cycle, and I actually want to learn more about, okay, the birth control, what's that done to me?
Right.
Or, yeah, why is it that you know, I'm using quite a few products each month, I'm just getting rid of them, you know, but I'm someone who's vegan for environmental reasons. I'm like, but I'll just forget about it when I menstruate.
Right.
So it's just, and also then, you know, the technology that they've created so that we can, again, I won't spoil it for what they're about to say, but in terms of just using our menstrual blood rather than just, it's just gone and that's it. So I think, yeah, I mean, they all speak for themselves, but they complement each other so well, because there's not many people in this realm that they're kind of working in this field. So I think they all know each other.
I think that's the key thing that you said, right? There's not a lot of people working in this field. Of course, साडा गोल यही है कि इस चीज़ नू बदलिया जाए. But before we get there, the first step is listening to the women who are actually doing the work, who are making that field for the rest of us who will follow. So take a छोटी जी break ले रुकते हैं. Break तो बाद panelists साडे नाल जुड़नगे. तुसी भी इस तरह जुड़े रहो. मिलते हैं break तो इस बार. ब्रेक तो बाद सारे ਨੂੰ ਇੱਕ ਵਾਰੀ ਫਿਰ ਪ੍ਰੋਗਰਾਮ ਦੇ ਵਿੱਚ ਸਵਾਗਤ ਕਰਦੇ ਹਾਂ. ਅੱਜ ਅਸੀਂ ਕੁਝ ਇਹੋ ਜਿਹੇ ਮੁੱਦਿਆਂ ਦੀ ਗੱਲ ਕਰ ਰਹੇ ਹਾਂ ਜਿਨ੍ਹਾਂ ਦੇ ਬਾਰੇ ਅਕਸਰ ਸਾਡੀ ਕਮਿਊਨਿਟੀ ਦੇ ਵਿੱਚ ਜਾਂ ਸਾਊਥ ਏਸ਼ੀਅਨ ਕਮਿਊਨਿਟੀ ਦੇ ਵਿੱਚ ਜ਼ਿਆਦਾ ਚਰਚਾ ਨਹੀਂ ਹੁੰਦੀ, ਬਟ ਦੈਟ ਨੀਡਸ ਟੂ ਚੇਂਜ. ਸੋ ਇਸ ਮਹੀਨੇ ਜਿੱਥੇ ਪੂਰੀ ਦੁਨੀਆ ਵੂਮਨਸ ਹਿਸਟਰੀ ਮੰਥ ਮਨਾ ਰਹੀ ਹੈ, ਅਸੀਂ ਵੀ ਵੱਖ-ਵੱਖ ਔਰਤਾਂ ਦੇ ਨਾਲ ਜੁੜੇ ਹੋਏ ਮੁੱਦੇ ਤੁਹਾਡੇ ਨਾਲ ਪੇਸ਼ ਕਰ ਰਹੇ ਹਾਂ. ਐਂਡ ਯੂਨਾਈਟਿਡ ਨੇਸ਼ਨਸ ਵੱਲੋਂ ਕਮਿਸ਼ਨ ਔਨ ਦ ਸਟੇਟਸ ਆਫ ਵੂਮਨ ਇੱਕ ਸਪੈਸ਼ਲ ਪੈਨਲ ਅੱਜ ਲੈ ਕੇ ਹਾਜ਼ਰ ਹੋਇਆ ਹੈ, ਜਿਹਦੇ ਵਿੱਚ ਸਾਡੀ ਆਪਣੀ ਕਮਿਊਨਿਟੀ ਦੀ ਆਰਗੇਨਾਈਜੇਸ਼ਨ ਸਿੱਖ ਹਿਊਮਨ ਰਾਈਟਸ ਗਰੁੱਪ ਨੇ ਇੱਕ ਪੈਨਲ ਸਪਾਂਸਰ ਕੀਤਾ. ਉਸ ਪੈਨਲ ਵਿੱਚੋਂ ਅੱਜ ਸਾਡੇ ਨਾਲ ਗੈਸਟ ਸਟੂਡੀਓ ਵੀ ਪਹੁੰਚੇ ਹਨ, talking about the intersection of women in technology and women's reproductive health, women's menstruation issues, ਖਾਸ ਕਰਕੇ ਜਿਸ ਸੈਕਟਰ ਦੇ ਵਿੱਚ ਨਵੀਂ ਡਿਵੈਲਪਮੈਂਟ ਹੋ ਰਹੀ ਹੈ ਉਹਦੇ ਬਾਰੇ ਜਾਣਕਾਰੀ ਲੈ ਕੇ ਅੱਜ ਸਾਡੇ ਵੰਡਰਫੁਲ ਪੈਨਲਿਸਟ ਸਾਡੇ ਨਾਲ ਜੁੜੇ ਹਨ. So please join me in welcoming our next set of guests from the panel conducted by the Commission on the Status of Women at the UN. First of all, to all three of you ladies, welcome to our studio. Sat Sri Akal.
Thank you very much.
So good to have you. I want to introduce everyone to the viewers. Dr. Sarah Nasri, co-founder of Quinn. And we're going to have all of these wonderful ladies. Aap dasange ke ina di key products hage kis tarah innovation leke aa rahe hain. Dr. Sarah Nasri, co-founder Quinn. Dr. Olivia Ahn, CEO and co-founder of FiOS. And Kristen Kagetsu, co-founder of Sathi Bags, who is flown all the way from India to be here for the panel, even though you're locally from New York, you live in India now. So before we even get into the conversation that took place at the panel today, which once again was really a groundbreaking conversation, not in your circles, but for the rest of us, because people are not talking about this, probably don't even know about the kind of work that you women are doing. So Dr. Nasri, I'm going to start with you. You're originally from Denmark, but you're settled now in California, and you're working on really a phenomenal technology that intersects with women's health. Please tell us about this.
Yes. So our company is called Quinn. It means woman in Danish, and it's a women's health company. We care about making healthcare and screening for various health conditions, women-specific conditions, accessible. And so the way that we do that is we use menstrual blood, that is blood that comes every month, as a way to really make screening easy, convenient, non-invasive, using a product, we call it the Q-pad. It is built and sort of feels and looks like any other pad, but it has embedded a small collection device. So women use it for a couple of hours during your monthly cycle. There's an oval printed on the pad which tells a woman, you know, once the oval is covered, you've collected enough blood for us to run testing. Then there's a small strip that you pull, which you remove. You throw away the pad like you would any other pad, and then you place that strip into a small collection container that has room for 2 strips. This is then thrown in the mailbox. We receive it. We analyze it for various important health biomarkers, and then we give the information back to the woman, and she can share it with her doctor as well. So really thinking about period blood, not just as a feminine hygiene product, a topic, but really as a changing the conversation from hygiene to actual healthcare.
Not just actual healthcare, but data, actual data, hard facts that give us more information or a better perspective on women's health, a unique perspective which maybe hasn't existed the way it should. Dr. Ahn, CEO, co-founder of FiOS. First of all, I want you to tell us what this name stands for, because your product is something that is now doing a intersectionality between women's health as well as environmental sustainability, and you have data that you are using to back that up. But I want to specifically learn about the name of this product.
Yes, of course. I can understand that. So far, throughout all of our lives, we've been taught not to put things down the toilet that shouldn't be. But we're challenging that. So that's why FiOS was born. So it's short for, it's a truncation of Flush Us. So put together, it's FiOS. Why we've done that is because we really wanted to give back the reign of control to the consumer. When you put something into the bin, you don't know what's going to happen to it. It could end up into a landfill, it could end up into an incinerator, or it could end up into the waterways or get washed into the oceans. None of these routes would really allow to reclaim any of this amazing material and to protect our planet. So with this product, we've developed something called Flush Tech, and we've applied that into a period product that allows it to be completely flushable, but also completely microplastic free. So right now we've launched in the UK. So this means that once you flush this, within a few minutes, this pad will break apart, and then within a few hours, once it's reached to the water treatment center, it'll allow it to break down fully into 3 materials. So firstly is biogas, which will be reprocessed and used as renewable energy. Secondly will be the biosolids, which will be all of the cellulose and the plant fibers, and that will be repurposed for fertilizer. And then finally is just water. So all of these 3 things will allow for something that should be disposable to be completely brought back into the ecosystem.
You know, the amount of thought that's put into this, right? I just want to pull back for 1 second. When women are talking about their personal experience with menstruation, I don't think the average woman has the time or the ability to care for what's happening to that product after it leaves you, after you're done using it, right? Forget about the other half of society, right? If women aren't even thinking like that, we can hardly expect the men to be talking about these kind of things. When it comes to sustainability, Kirsten Kagetsu, co-founder of Sathi Pads, at the session earlier, Kirsten, you mentioned something really interesting, which for our viewers is really, really significant. You mentioned how in India, Sathi Pads, you use agri-waste, and you're able to work with the local farmers, even provide them some additional income to put your product together. Tell us about this.
Thank you so much. So at Sathi, we make biodegradable and compostable sanitary pads, and they're made from banana fiber and bamboo fiber. So we started in order to address lack of access to menstrual products. So in India, only 36% of women have access, and that was something where we were thinking, what can we do to even start to tackle this issue? But at the same time, most of the women who don't have access are in rural areas, and so then on top of that, there isn't any waste infrastructure. So we were thinking, how could we kind of address the lack of access, but also not cause a waste issue? And that's kind of where we developed, okay, this must be something that can also be composted, because a lot of communities have local compost. And then we were looking at already using agri-waste fibers, and so basically with banana, that's where we started. A lot of farmers will throw away the stems after they harvest the fruit, and because the life cycle of banana tree is only 9 to 12 months, every year you get a lot of waste. Wow. And so we can use that waste for our product.
Amazing stuff. Once again, just the science behind some of the projects that you're working on, these innovations, is spectacular. But then to translate that into women's issues or women's reproductive rights, women's progress, is really the most significant thing here. I want to learn a little bit more about some of the conversations that were had today without giving too much away. Viewers ਨੂੰ ਇਸ ਪੂਰੇ ਪੈਨਲ ਦੀ ਵੀਡੀਓ ਵੀ YouTube Jus Punjabi ਤੇ YouTube ਤੇ ਤੁਸੀਂ ਵੇਖ ਸਕਦੇ ਹੋ। ਥੋੜੀ ਜਿਹੀ ਝਲਕ ਇਸ ਪ੍ਰੋਗਰਾਮ ਦੇ ਵਿੱਚ ਦਿਖਾਵਾਂਗੇ, but most importantly ਕੀ ਕੁਝ ਡਿਸਕਸ ਹੋਇਆ ਪੈਨਲਿਸਟ ਆਪ ਤੁਹਾਨੂੰ ਦੱਸਣਗੇ ਬ੍ਰੇਕ ਤੋਂ ਬਾਅਦ। ब्रेक तो बाद मुड़ हाजिर होए तुसी वेख रहे हो प्रोग्राम अज दा मुद्दा। इस महीने असी भावें वुमेन्स हिस्टरी मंथ जरूर मना रहे हैं, बट कित्थे तक असी औरतां दे मुद्दिआं नूं फोरफ्रंट ते रखदे हां। ਜੋ ਵੱਡੇ ਮੁੱਦੇ ਹਨ ਉਹਨਾਂ ਦੇ ਬਾਰੇ ਤੁਸੀਂ ਖਬਰਾਂ ਜ਼ਰੂਰ ਸੁਣਦੇ ਹੋ, ਖਾਸ ਕਰਕੇ ਜਿੱਥੇ ਔਰਤਾਂ ਦੇ ਰੀਪਰੋਡਕਟਿਵ ਰਾਈਟਸ ਦੀ ਗੱਲ ਆਉਂਦੀ। ਯੂਨਾਈਟਿਡ ਸਟੇਟਸ ਦੇ ਵਿੱਚ ਪੋਲੀਟੀਕਲ ਤੌਰ ਤੇ ਇਹਦੀ ਕਾਫੀ ਚਰਚਾ ਹੋ ਰਹੀ ਹੈ। ਪੋਲੀਟਿਕਸ ਦੇ ਵਿੱਚ, ਸਰਕਾਰ ਦੇ ਵਿੱਚ, DC ਦੇ ਵਿੱਚ ਕੀ ਕੁਝ ਹੁੰਦਾ ਹੈ ਉਹਦੇ ਉੱਤੇ ਸ਼ਾਇਦ ਸਾਡਾ ਕੰਟਰੋਲ ਵੱਡੇ ਲੈਵਲ ਤੇ ਨਹੀਂ ਹੈਗਾ, ਬਟ ਡੇ ਟੂ ਡੇ ਆਈਟਮਸ, ਡੇ ਟੂ ਡੇ ਇਸ਼ੂਜ਼ ਔਰਤਾਂ ਦੇ, ਉਹਨਾਂ ਉੱਤੇ ਅਸੀਂ ਕੰਟਰੋਲ ਐਕਸਰਸਾਈਜ਼ ਕਰ ਸਕਦੇ ਹਾਂ। ਸੋ ਇਹਦੇ ਬਾਰੇ ਕਿਸ ਤਰ੍ਹਾਂ ਇਨੋਵੇਸ਼ਨ, ਕਿਸ ਤਰ੍ਹਾਂ ਫੀਲਡ ਦੇ ਵਿੱਚ ਚੇਂਜ ਅੱਗੇ ਆ ਰਿਹਾ ਤੇ ਕਿੱਥੇ ਹਲੇ ਤੱਕ change the load at? Where do the gaps exist, especially when we look at the information, the data, the science that should be bringing about the progress? Is gap nu understand karan lai khas karke jinu data gender data gap kiha janda hai jo aurataan de mardan de vich exist karda hai। Sade naal panelists ek bari fir jude han। Please join me in welcoming back our wonderful panelists, Dr. Nazri, Dr. An, and of course Kirsten Kagetsu of Sathi Pads from India. Ladies, you had an amazing and extremely informative session this morning at the UN, sponsored by the Sikh Human Rights Group, talking about the innovation in women's menstruation. Once again, to pull back a little bit, the work that you're all doing highlights this much larger problem that exists across the board when it comes to women's health care, which is lack of data, lack of studies, right? Whether it's something like we were discussing before, you know, the crash dummies in a car crash safety test that's done are designed based on the size and shape of a traditional man. And so, if, you know, originally, if a woman were to get in a car crash, that airbag may not, you know, save her life the way it's supposed to. So things like that. And healthcare is no different. But menstruation largely is seen as a women's issue. And I know, Dr. An, you're shaking your head because I know you're challenging those norms too. But let's start with where the data doesn't exist. Dr. Nazri, this innovation, Quinn, that collects, you know, a woman's or an individual's menstrual blood to test it for various things is not something that is generally thought of as a area to collect information. But you've had a different experience. Tell us about this.
Yeah, when we started the company, frankly, the first thing you do, you look what has been published on this topic, right? And it was shocking, maybe not surprising, that only one paper was published on the proteomics of menstrual blood. And so, you know, based on that paper, we've worked and built on top of that information. And what we've learned is that there is tremendous diagnostic utility in menstrual blood that really, frankly, has been entirely overlooked. So there's this event that women have every month that we are throwing away, but there's really important health information in there. And then you combine that with the fact that women's health has in general been overlooked, that we have an issue with accessibility of healthcare and giving women, especially globally, access to screening. And at the same time, we have this abundance of bodily fluid, really menstrual blood, that comes every month completely non-invasively, that could help bridge the gap between getting care and getting information to your health. And that's sort of where we're really excited about the data that we've published with Stanford University on the QPAD diagnostic utility. We just recently got FDA approval in Southeast Asia, actually, for cervical cancer screening, which we're really excited about, because it is still today, despite being an entirely preventable cancer, still today is the second highest cause of cancer-related mortality among women, and it is because women are not getting screened. Wow. So by providing easy and accessible products like the QPAD, for example, we really hope that this will be a way for women to get access to healthcare
Dr. Nazri, which areas of the world, I know you had mentioned this earlier in the panel as well, which areas of the world do you really see this having a large-scale positive impact, especially when it comes to cervical cancer? You were mentioning some numbers earlier.
Yeah, so on a global scale, 350,000 women die every year because of cervical cancer. And again, entirely preventable if we were able to screen for it, right? So we've done studies in Zimbabwe, we've done studies in Thailand, we're doing studies here in the US and undergoing FDA approval here because we need to collect that data, and the data has to be diverse. It's a global problem, we need global solutions, and trials need to be representative of women all over the world, right?
Absolutely. Dr. An, you know, in your specific space, developing this product, you've had your own experience when it comes to not just the gender data gap, but the data gap in general. Tell us about this.
Yes, of course. I really echo what Dr. Nazri has said, because for me, I'm sort of looking at it through more of a commercial lens, because through the lens of product development, I think through any sort of product development, any sort of commercial product good developer, we're looking at designing products fit for the person who's going to be using that. And already when we first started up FiOS, it's been 6 years now, gathering that data about what are the things that are important to the women who are using them. And right now, the language and the scales are set by the very few companies who hold much of the market share. In the UK, Always holds over 53% of the market share. So when one company effectively has over half of that, then the scale that we've been talking about so far is just absorbency. But exactly like the work that Dr. Nasri is doing around diagnosis, accessibility, with environmentalism, with pain, there's so many other scales in which we should be really understanding the consumer. And with this data, I really hope to work along with lots of different companies to be able to put that together for the benefit of not just half the world, but then this could also translate across and benefit everyone else as well.
Absolutely. I mean, when you look at the numbers, right, it's really shocking, some of the glaring holes that exist, right? Kirsten, you were sharing in the panel earlier that, you know, in India, the women that you work with, right, specifically in these underserved areas, these villages, pindan de vich ja ke, all over the country, you're seeing women who, you know, forget about just knowing that you can use a pad. They don't even have basic accessibility to healthcare, and once again the data gap is even more prevalent. Shocking for a country that not only is on track to have one of the largest populations in the world, but one of the youngest. The amount of young women in India that are not able to get basic care. What kind of information or data have you encountered?
Yeah, so I think one of the things is that we've looked for a lot of reports published by the UN or published by other international bodies to see kind of what studies have already been done, and this was back when we started, but also even recently. And there haven't been many new studies published around access. So if we talk about just plain access first, and then look into even, you know, the health data is definitely not there. But access leads to a lot of other issues, like besides health, also being able to stay in school or stay in work, and that can again affect your future and the prospects later. So I think that's definitely something where we're looking at, you know, we've done studies in rural areas of Jharkhand, and we've gone in and we've had to do the surveys like by hand, I mean, and then collect all that data in Excel. So that's a, you know, kind of a you know, it's something that I think there's a lot of room still to provide those.
You were telling me about a study you came across that may have been the last big study that you were able to find. What year was that study from?
2016.
Wow.
Yeah.
So certainly a long way to go here. You know, in terms of the generation that we're working with today, people who are of a younger generation tend to be more in touch, not just with, you know, innovation in these different areas, but just are able to disseminate some of this information better. I guess I'll start with you. Dr. Nasri, how do you feel that this generation or the next generation has the capability to change not just the thinking and the narrative around this area, around women's reproductive health, women's menstruation, but then also change some of the actions that are taken by society to address the big gaps in these areas? Yeah,
I think we're looking at a generation that has more awareness, right? Even the generation Gen Z, so to speak, even more so, and some of the taboos and stigmas that I think has existed and certainly still exist in some areas and in some cultures, but those are disappearing with the next generation. And there's a pride in being a woman, women speaking up, women caring about their healthcare, women being incredibly educated actually about their healthcare, coming into the doctor's office almost knowing this is what I think is wrong with me, and this is what I need to be prescribed. Women are also working now; they don't have time necessarily to go and get, you know, care for themselves. Right. So I think we're going to see a generation that needs easy access, that are going to demand easy access, that are aware and they want to see change. They want to see empowerment, and they want to be in control of their own health.
Right, I couldn't agree with you more. Dr. An, with some of the market research you're doing, I know you guys are big on this. You were telling us how, you know, your mix-up at FiOS is, you know, like 70% engineers, R&D, you know, and everybody else is in the rest of the grouping. Tell us about how your market research has shown you that is there a shift in people's thinking? Do people feel compelled to use a biodegradable, environmentally sustainable product that may be better for their health as well? What are you seeing?
I'm definitely seeing a shift in what is seen as a prerequisite. And I echo, I'm very inspired and I'm hopeful because of the conversations, the TikTok generation, the social media generation, and the activism that we're seeing. There's issues that people care about. It is not just the half of the world that are affected by it, it's everyone else. We're seeing brothers, partners, husbands, fathers, all standing up for women who need to fight more to be able to, like you say, get access, to understand the gaps in the data. In our market research, the sustainability is becoming more of a prerequisite. We've seen the wave of corporate rebranding over the last 20 years, from historical companies to these newer companies, where every company cannot just be for profit now. There must be a mission.
A social responsibility.
Exactly, exactly. So yes, I'm inspired, and I'm looking forward to what comes next.
Oh man, certainly interesting times to live in, but we are hopeful for what comes next. And Kirsten, you know, in closing, once again, you're on the ground in India. Sathi Pads is a well-known name to the South Asian community. How do you feel that, once again, on the ground in some of those underserved areas, is there change that you're noticing? Can you share, you know, the trajectory of where things are headed, especially in a country like India?
Yes, I think there's two stories I'd want to share. One is related to in village areas where we've been distributing products and doing kind of educational workshops around what is menstruation and how do we use a sanitary pad and all of those types of things. But when we talked about our product, it's biodegradable, but that was not necessarily a word that we were able to kind of explain necessarily. So instead we just said, okay, well, when you bury it, it goes away. And a lot of women actually like that feature of it, even though you wouldn't say, oh, people in a village maybe don't care as much if it's biodegradable or not. But the reason was because if you have a product that goes away when you bury it, it doesn't kind of land up somewhere else because it's been dug up by the local animals or anything like that. So it kind of helps with managing the taboo.
Right.
And the second story is around, we just went to a local fair a couple of weeks ago, and at the end of the day, all these, I guess, young, maybe 20 guys in their 20s came up to our booth and said, oh, I need to buy this for my friend or my, you know, my sister, my family. And so we had a lot of sales because some guys were really excited to figure it out.
I think that's such an interesting thing that you've mentioned. You know, here we are, of course, we're talking about Women's History Month. This is a initiative, you know, the Commission for the Status of Women is involved, but really so much of the change needs to come from the other half, right? Absolutely. The cohorts, the allies and advocates, the men, brothers, sons, husbands, that, you know, support these women and these kind of initiatives. Ladies, such an informative session. Once again, Dr. Sarah Nasri of Quinn, a product that is, you know, bringing a medical purpose to menstruation that, once you said, once again, happens every month and it's just going to waste. Of course, Dr. Olivia An with FiOS, Flush Us, biodegradable pads, and Kirsten Kagetsu with Sathi Pads, operating in India, doing great nonprofit work. Thank you to all of you for the work that you're doing and, of course, for joining us today. I'm going to share some bites from the panel session as well. इत्थे एक छोटी जी ब्रेक ਲਈ रुकते हैं. ब्रेक तो बाद पैनल सैशन तो भी कुछ ਤੁਹਾਨੂੰ झलक दिखावांगे. Women's History Month ਨੂੰ ਮਨਾਉਣ ਦੇ ਇਸ ਥੀਮ ਦੇ ਵਿੱਚ ਅਸੀਂ ਅੱਜ ਇੱਕ ਬਹੁਤ ਹੀ ਇੰਪੋਰਟੈਂਟ ਪ੍ਰੋਗਰਾਮ ਤੁਹਾਡੇ ਨਾਲ ਲੈ ਕੇ ਹਾਜ਼ਰ ਹੋਏ ਹਾਂ. ਜਿਨ ਪੈਨਲਿਸਟਸ ਤੋਂ ਇਹ ਸੁਣਨ ਨੂੰ ਮਿਲ ਰਿਹਾ ਕਿਸ ਤਰ੍ਹਾਂ ਔਰਤਾਂ ਦੇ ਏਰੀਆਜ਼ ਦੇ ਵਿੱਚ ਇਸ਼ੂਜ਼ ਨੂੰ ਲੈ ਕੇ ਇਨੋਵੇਸ਼ਨ ਹੋ ਰਹੀ ਹੈ, ਖਾਸ ਕਰਕੇ ਟੈਕਨੋਲੋਜੀ ਦਾ ਇਸਤੇਮਾਲ ਹੋ ਰਿਹਾ ਹੈ, ਸਾਇੰਸ ਅਤੇ ਡੇਟਾ ਦਾ ਇਸਤੇਮਾਲ ਹੋ ਰਿਹਾ ਹੈ। उस पैनल तो मैं थोड़ी जी झलक तुहानूं दिखाना चाहती हूँ। Once again, an amazing panel sponsored by the Sikh Human Rights Group in association with the Commission on the Status of Women at the United Nations. तुसीं ये झलक हुण वेख सकदे हो।
I'm Bethan Walters, so I'm representing the Sikh Human Rights Group for this year's UN Women CSW NGO for the 67th session. So the Sikh Human Rights Group is an NGO with UN consultative status, so it allows us to lobby at the United Nations and obviously be represented here. So the NGO focuses on different humanitarian, biodiverse, ideological challenges, so it looks at kind of basically trying to address this universalistic kind of attitude we have and trying to be more pluralistic with our language, especially at the UN, so trying to be more inclusive with who we talk to rather than looking at it through one lens and talking to one civilization. We'll talk to people from different genders, people from different religions, different cultures. I'm really just trying to challenge the kind of the hegemony that a lot of people are fighting. We are not only kind of try to speak then on behalf of a small minority, which is what universalistic language tends to do, but we try to obviously include absolutely everyone in the conversation. So I'm sure you're wondering how this has come on to menstruation. So you are in the right room. So this is our parallel event on the innovation of menstruation. So as an NGO, we've been working on menstrual health in as many ways possible. In the last year, we saw the UN Human Rights Council hold their first ever panel on menstrual hygiene, human rights and gender equality. We made a statement that was mostly to do with the language they use around menstruation. So we really tried to challenge, obviously, the term menstrual hygiene sometimes then reiterates the stigma and taboo attached to it. So again, going back to that pluralistic position is using more inclusive language. But we also try to address as well this luxury tax that still exists on menstrual products and obviously almost making it a choice that we menstruate. And because of the taboo and language that's attached to menstruation along with other things, that's why people feel less encouraged maybe to protest against it, but also again governments will still have this tax on these products.
Hi everybody, thanks Beth Ann for such a lovely welcome. It's such a privilege and honor to be here and I'm so excited to be sharing today. Flow Living is this company that I started 10 years ago, although I've been taking care of women's hormonal issues for 2 decades.
So the way that I guess I intersect with this panel, because I am not specifically working directly in menstrual innovation, like some of these others, but I am a storyteller and a filmmaker. And I started 15 years ago with a movie about midwifery and childbirth called The Business of Being Born. And that movie is still quite evergreen, sadly. It's sort of needed more than ever, looking at specifically the maternal health care crisis in this country and how mothers and babies are not being served by the system.
जिस तरह तुसी वेख्या किस तरह दी कन्वर्सेशनस हुई हैं इस पैनल दे विच जिहदे किन्ने अटेंडीज सीगे both virtually as well as in person. Beth Ann Walters, Monica Gill of the Sikh Human Rights Group. Beth Ann, you meticulously organized this program. What a fantastic set of panelists and the conversations that were had. For folks looking to take some, big call to actions away from these conversations, especially this panel today, what would you say is a big message, especially for South Asian women who may be straddling that line of, I am a modern, educated woman, and I have this cultural taboo that maybe my menstruation isn't something that should be talked about or innovated or even be in any scientific, realm. What is a call to action that we can take away?
Well, I think you said it. I think it's having the conversations initially. Because, again, we normalise really heavy bleeds. We normalise people not having bleeds. We normalise people taking birth control and feeling depressed. We normalise so much in this field that isn't normal. You know, you're not meant to be in agony when you menstruate. It's not going to be comfortable all the time, but you're not meant to be missing school because of pain, right? So I think that's the first thing, is you actually have these conversations. Once we start having them, even with our friends, maybe asking our mothers, our grandparents, like their experiences, that's when you start to realize, oh, okay, like this is really interesting how our menstruation is different. Our menstrual cycle is our 5th vital sign. It genuinely gives us, I mean, which you've seen with Quinn, they're literally using it as that. It's a window into our health. If my period is really heavy, I might be low in iron. If I'm not having a period, I'm not eating enough, or I'm doing too much exercise, my hormones are completely imbalanced. You know, there's so many different elements where if you've got migraines when you menstruate, and that's just without then a birth control, in fact, you know, impacting all of that. So I think that it's just talk, initially just talk, and actually then start to just take note as well, just whether that's on an app like Flow Living with Elisa's product, or you actually just start tracking yourself and be like, okay, like it typically is 28 days or however long it is for you, and notice, oh, the months I'm really stressed, they're far apart. And then you start to look at your life, and you also, again, there's been so many kind of books on it that no one really knows about, but actually just start to adapt then your life to when we menstruate. You know, when you're premenstrual / when you're menstruating, we're tired. Your body's going through some stuff. Take it easy if you can. And then when you're ovulating, when you've got this energy, when you're a little bit more kind of ready to go, that can be when you kind of take it, you know, a bit busier. I think the working week is set up for a man's body. It's a 24-hour cycle. Obviously we couldn't do it, everyone menstruates at different points, but ideally if we could create our own working week, it'd be our working month, of which I would take 6 days and that's my week off, you know, and then I would work the rest of like the 3 weeks. So I just start talking, and if you've got the money, invest in these products, you know.
Absolutely. And you know, the investment is, of course, money is the big one, right? And some of our panelists, I mean, they've gotten millions of dollars of seed funding to take these projects to the next level, but at a community or an individual level, that investment can be a conversation, can be a different purchase, and can be advocacy, right? Monica, in closing, खास करके साडे पंजाबियां ਲਈ, right? ਜਦੋਂ ਇਹੋ ਜਿਹੀ ਚੀਜ਼ਾਂ ਦੀ ਅਸੀਂ ਡਿਸਕਸ਼ਨ ਕਰਦੇ ਹਾਂ, especially in the United States, even in this country, sometimes it feels that women's health in general is under attack. What would you say are some call to actions or a big message that our community can take away from today's conversation?
I was actually just thinking about that. You know, I wouldn't say a call to action per se, but I would definitely say ਜਿਹੜੀ ਅੱਜ ਜਿਹੜੇ ਦਰਸ਼ਕ ਸਾਂਝੇ ਹੋਏ ਨੇ, especially ਜਿਹੜੀਆਂ ਮਾਵਾਂ, ਦਾਦੀਆਂ, you know, ਮਾਸੀਆਂ, ਮਾਮੀਆਂ, you know, ਉੱਥੇ ਦੇਖਦੀਆਂ, ਆਪਣੀ ਕੁੜੀਆਂ ਨਾਲ ਇਸ ਬਾਰੇ ਗੱਲ ਕਰੋ, you know, ਤੁਹਾਡੇ ਪੀਰੀਅਡ ਕੀ ਹੁੰਦੇ ਆ, ਕਿੱਦਾਂ ਦੇ ਹੋਣੇ ਚਾਹੀਦੇ ਆ. I know, like, I'm taking it a step further, but ਸਾਡੇ ਕਲਚਰਸ ਕਿਸੇ ਵੀ ਇੱਦਾਂ ਦੀ ਸਬਜੈਕਟ 'ਚ ਗੱਲ ਨਹੀਂ ਹੁੰਦੀ. ਮਾਵਾਂ ਸੰਗਦੀਆਂ ਨੇ, ਧੀਆਂ ਸੰਗਦੀਆਂ ਨੇ, ਯੂ ਨੋ, ਇੱਕ ਪੜ੍ਹਦਾ ਬਹੁਤ ਵੱਡੀ ਚੀਜ਼ ਹੁੰਦੀ ਆ. ਪਰ ਜਿੰਨਾ ਜ਼ਿਆਦਾ ਅਸੀਂ ਇਸ ਮੁੱਦੇ 'ਤੇ ਗੱਲ ਕਰਾਂਗੇ, ਉਨੀਆਂ ਜ਼ਿਆਦਾ ਸਾਡੀਆਂ ਕੁੜੀਆਂ ਪ੍ਰੀਪੇਅਰਡ ਹੋਊਗੀਆਂ, ਕਿਉਂਕਿ ਮੈਂਸਟਰੂਏਸ਼ਨ ਦੇ ਨਾਲ ਬਹੁਤ ਕੁਛ ਜੁੜਿਆ ਆ. ਯੂ ਨੋ, ਫਰਟੀਲਿਟੀ, ਨਿਆਣੇ ਕਿੱਦਾਂ ਪੈਦਾ ਕਰਨੇ, ਆਪਣੇ ਆਪ ਨੂੰ ਸੇਫ ਕਿੱਦਾਂ ਰੱਖਣਾ, ਯੂ ਨੋ, ਆਪਣੇ ਆਪ ਨੂੰ ਸੁਰੱਖਿਅਤ ਕਿੱਦਾਂ ਰੱਖਣਾ, ਢੱਕਣਾ ਕਿੱਦਾਂ, ਯੂ ਨੋ, ਸਾਫ਼ ਸਫਾਈ ਕਿੱਦਾਂ ਕਰਨੀ, ਇਹੋ ਜਿਹੀਆਂ ਚੀਜ਼ਾਂ ਇੱਕ ਕੁੜੀ ਲਾਈਕ ਜੰਮਦੇ ਪੈਦਾ ਹੋ ਕੇ ਥੋੜ੍ਹਾ ਲਾਈਕ ਆਪਣੇ ਨਾਲ ਲੈ ਕੇ ਆਉਂਦੀ ਆ. ਜੇ ਮਾਵਾਂ ਸਿਖਾਊਗੀਆਂ ਨਹੀਂ ਤਾਂ ਆਪਾਂ ਕਿੱਦਾਂ ਸਿੱਖਾਂਗੀਆਂ. ਦੂਜੀ ਗੱਲ, ਜਦੋਂ ਯੂ ਨੋ ਸੁਸਾਇਟੀ ਵਿੱਚ ਕੋਈ ਨਵੀਂ ਚੀਜ਼ ਨਿਕਲਦੀ ਹੈ, ਜਿਨ੍ਹਾਂ ਚੀਜ਼ਾਂ ਬਾਰੇ ਅਸੀਂ ਅੱਜ ਗੱਲਾਂ ਕੀਤੀਆਂ, ਉਹ ਤੋਂ ਸੰਗੋ ਨਾ, ਗੱਲ ਕਰੋ, ਪੁੱਛੋ ਕੀ ਹੋ ਰਿਹਾ, ਕੀ ਨਹੀਂ ਹੋ ਰਿਹਾ. ਜਿਹੜੀ ਵੂਮਨਸ ਹੈਲਥ ਆ, ਇੱਕ ਤਾਂ ਵੂਮਨ ਇਨ ਜਨਰਲ ਸਬ ਸਿਟੀਜ਼ਨਸ ਸੋਚੀਆਂ ਗਈਆਂ ਨੇ. ਇਹ ਦੁਨੀਆ ਤੋਂ ਜਦੋਂ ਦੁਨੀਆ ਸ਼ੁਰੂ ਹੋਈ ਆ ਉਦੋਂ ਤੋਂ, ਯੂ ਨੋ, ਇਹ ਆਪਣੇ ਹੱਥ 'ਚ ਆ. ਅਸੀਂ ਆਪਣੇ ਆਪ ਨੂੰ ਕਿੱਦਾਂ ਸਾਂਭਣਾ, ਆਪਣੀਆਂ ਧੀਆਂ ਨੂੰ ਕਿੱਦਾਂ ਸਾਂਭਣਾ, ਆਪਣੀ ਬੀਬੀਆਂ ਨੂੰ ਕਿੱਦਾਂ ਸਾਂਭਣਾ, ਅਤੇ ਇਹਨਾਂ ਚੀਜ਼ਾਂ ਬਾਰੇ ਸਿੱਖ ਕੇ, ਇਹਨਾਂ ਚੀਜ਼ਾਂ ਬਾਰੇ ਸੋਚ ਕੇ ਅਸੀਂ ਅੱਗੇ ਵੱਧ ਸਕਦੇ ਹਾਂ. ਸੋ ਆਈ ਹੋਪ ਤੁਹਾਨੂੰ ਅੱਜ ਦਾ ਪ੍ਰੋਗਰਾਮ ਪਸੰਦ ਆਇਆ ਹੋਗਾ. ਸਿੱਖ ਹਿਊਮਨ ਰਾਈਟਸ ਗਰੁੱਪ ਨੇ ਬੜੀ ਮਿਹਨਤ ਕਰਕੇ ਇਹ ਸਾਰਾ ਸਾਰੇ ਕੁਛ ਲੈ ਕੇ ਆਏ. ਅਸੀਂ ਆਪਣੇ ਪੈਨਲਿਸਟ ਨੂੰ ਲੈ ਕੇ ਆਏ ਹਾਂ, ਦੁਨੀਆ ਦੇ ਕੋਨੇ 'ਚੋਂ. ਐਂਡ ਆਈ ਹੋਪ ਤੁਸੀਂ ਇਹਨੂੰ ਇੰਜੋਏ ਕੀਤਾ. ਐਂਡ ਥੈਂਕ ਯੂ ਜਸ ਪੰਜਾਬੀ ਦੇ ਜਿਹੜੇ ਸਾਨੂੰ ਇੱਥੇ ਲੈ ਕੇ ਆਏ.
जी, once again, it is our pleasure eho ji galna lokan age rakhna, to have these kind of conversations with our viewers. Once again, a panel on the innovation of menstruation was conducted today as part of the United Nations Commission on the Status of Women, sponsored by the Sikh Human Rights Group. ਅੱਜ ਦੇ ਪ੍ਰੋਗਰਾਮ ਨੂੰ ਲੈ ਕੇ ਸਾਡੇ ਗੈਸਟ ਲਈ ਕੋਈ ਕੁਐਸਚਨਸ ਕਮੈਂਟਸ ਕੰਸਰਨ ਤੁਸੀਂ ਜਰੂਰ ਸਾਨੂੰ ਲਿਖ ਸਕਦੇ ਹੋ info@justbroadcasting.com, aashmeeta@justbroadcasting.com। ਹੁਣ ਸਾਨੂੰ ਵੀ ਦਿਓ ਇਜਾਜ਼ਤ। ਸਤਿ ਸ੍ਰੀ ਅਕਾਲ।